I can't do the pelvic thrust anymore. Not since my hernia operation. Well, I can do it. It's just that, it's a little bit painful, like. It's a shame, really, because they used to love it. Especially them two at Sycamore House. They'd wait for it. And then when I did it at the end of All Shook Up, they'd laugh and they'd clap and they'd shout, "Ball, ball!" It was it. Sandra, she's the one that does all of the events at Sycamore House. She always says to me, "Come on, Clive, your group is waiting for you." But I'm looking at the equipment. But by the equipment, I mean the microphone and my PA stand, I have to use a sack trolley now. Not very Elvis. Well, there you go. Sandra says she's going to get her all t-shirts printed with "Still Alive" with Clive written on them. She's a crazy Sandra. She always makes me laugh. See these? See this one? Best Elvis, 1979. I won that. That's the silver, there is. Oh, they all wanted to jive with me, Oh, aye. But I would choose it. I could afford to be. I made them look good, you see. Twirling them round, dragging them between my legs. But that's all they wanted, though. Just to jive. No snogging or anything like that. There were one, Natasha her name was. Bloody gorgeous. Long blonde hair, long legs. We had real chemistry on the floor, her and I. Soon as I heard Bill Haley start with 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock, we were off. No one to touch us. Then as soon as the jive were over, she just dropped me for the long queue of blokes waiting at the bar. I screwed up my courage once. Asked her to go out with me. But she just sneered and looked at me and said, "You must be joking." So I just shrugged, said I were only having a laugh. I wasn't. And then she met Tommy Clive, and so that was that. I started going out with Marion not long after. After a couple of years, we got married. She was all right. She couldn't jive though. Not like Natasha. Last time I were at Sycamore House, it were a bit special like. It were Violet's 100th. Imagine that being 100. I mean, it does make me wonder, about the way we look after them. I mean, sticking them in front of a telly all day. I mean, they get looked after, don't get me wrong, but oh, it wouldn't do for me. Anyway, there we are at Sycamore House, and there's Violet in a wheelchair with a telegram from the Queen. And we're having cake and sherry. That is nice. And then, I get up, and at the end of All Shook Up, forget, don't I? I'll go and do my pelvic thrust. Not thinking, you see, I was just performing. Well, the pain was that bad, I had to hang on to the microphone stand to stop myself from falling over. Sandra saw what had happened and she come towards me across the dining room. She took me into one of the little rooms at the back. Lie down, she said. I said, Sandra, the show must go on. She said, don't give over, Clive. He nodded the London Palladium. Now lie down. I said, Sandra, I've got to get back out there. She said, oh, shut up, Clive. Half of them don't even know you've gone. I thought that were a bit harsh. Now lie down, she said. She can be bossy, come Sandra. And take them shoes off. I looked at her. These are not shoes, I says. These are brothel creepers. But wherever they are, she said, you need to take them off. You can't get them tight trousers off while you're wearing them. I looked at her again. These are not trousers, I says. These are drain pipes. And anyway, why would I want to take them off? Oh, don't get your hopes up, Clive, she said. You just need to free things up a bit down there. Get a bit of relief. So there I am, stood up with me trousers right down over my knees, when suddenly in walks Mrs. Clarkson. She's the manageress. She's one of them women that looks down her nose at everything as if the entire world has a bad smell. Sent me packing. Never mind the agony I were in. I think it's time you left, Mr. Penrose, she says. Do you know, I do 3 homes now, not just Sycamore House, and I have never walked out early on any of them. I have never walked out before the end of one of my gigs. Well, to be fair, I didn't walk. I staggered. Sandra helped me get my stuff back in the van. She's a good lass. Anyway, I'm all right now. Marion were a bit like Mrs. Clarkson now I come to think of it. Although, I suppose that's not really fair, being as she's no longer with us. Marion, I mean, not Mrs. Clarkson. Went out with the washing one day, never come back. I were at home, you see, sorting out my music for my afternoon gig. Because I don't just do Elvis, you know. Oh, no, I do a bit of Frank Sinatra, some Matt Monroe, a bit of Dean Martin, and all the old wartime songs, and White Cliffs of Dover, The Long Way to Tipperary. They love them, the oldies. It brings back memories, you see. Anyway, so there I was, sorting out my music, and I saw her go out with a washing basket. Next thing I know, Mrs. Birch from next door's coming, and she's shouting, Clive, come quick, she's collapsed on the roses. And she was tugging at my shirt, and it was one of them with the frills round the cuffs. I mean, you can't get them anymore, so I had to try and stop her, but she just kept on. Clive, come on, she's covered in a wet sheet. And that were it. Massive heart attack. I asked Stuart to come back from Australia for the funeral. I didn't know him. Marion used to hate me singing for the old folk. She'd have a right go when I got my stage gear on. You think you're something special, Clive Penrose, don't you? Well, let me tell you, you're not. I says to her once, I says, you used to love jiving with me. You used to love Elvis. But she just looked at me and said, oh, shut up, Clive. That was more than 40 years ago. It's time you grew up and stop acting like a flaming teenager. So I stopped talking to her, really. Though I did used to wonder if she were as lonely as me when we'd sit down to watch Coronation Street of a night. She used to make me go shopping with her after I retired. I hated it. I used to follow along behind her like a lackey with a trolley, while she zoomed off down the aisles. Sometimes I'd meet the blokes I knew from the club, and we'd laugh and try and make a joke out of it, you know. Oh, she wasn't having that. Come on, Clive, she'd say. I'm waiting. Marion was not a contented woman. I mean, I knew I was a disappointment because she told me. I'm disappointed in you, Clive Penrose, she'd say, looking me up and down. So that's why I love singing for the old folk. We have a laugh and a bit of fun, and that's all it is, just a bit of fun. It's been a lifesaver for me, it has really. This letter come today. It's from Mrs. Clarkson at Sycamore House. She says, you see, this is your services are no longer required due to your unsuitable behaviour. She says she has to think of the safety of her residents. She says she's writing to the other 3 homes that perform that and all, so I can expect them to give me the push and all. This kind must be well and truly. That's the end of all this then. I shall miss Sandra and the old folk. Do you know, I bet you Marion's up there right now, laughing her head off. I found this place more or less by accident. I had no idea it existed, even though I travelled a road nearby many times before. Perhaps it was a trick of the light that brought me here. The autumn sun was low and blinding. I reached for my sunglasses, saw it turning on the left, and took it. I travelled for several minutes up a steep, tree-lined lane, until reaching a gate, I stopped. There were sheep in the fields opposite, their bodies small and compact, their fleeces black and white. They turned and trotted away as I leant on the gate, as if vexed by my presence. All around me was sound and movement. The branches creaked, the leaves rustled, the grass swished and swayed in the wind, and suddenly I felt happy, glad to be alive on top of this blustery hill, with nothing but me and the sun and the wide blue skies. I paused to look at the view. The green fields opposite, the valley below. And then I caught sight of it, away to my right, nestling at the foot of the hill. A large stone farmhouse, its walls covered in Virginia creeper, reaching up to the small windows just under the eaves. And away to my left, a large stretch of sparkling blue water. It's called Laithwaite's Rest, a pub with accommodation. I was told this one night by an old man as I sat in the bar. I had not invited his company. I was content to sip my single malt and gaze at the crackling logs in the fireplace and admire the burnished glow of the coal scuttle and the poker in the hearth. He just seemed to appear on the seat next to mine and started talking. "Belonged to the Laithwaites for generations," he said. "Course, that was before the dam was built and the reservoir filled. They took their land to fill it. They lost everything. Their sheep, their cattle. Only this farmhouse was left. They disappeared one night. The whole family. The old man, and a daughter too." He took off his cap and scratched his head. "It was a bad job." He put his cap back on and gazed at me from under bushy brows. "They were never found, you know. Never found." Each morning when I wake, I gaze out of my window through huge crimson leaves, some of them bigger than my hand. I look at the fields opposite, and the sheep like black and white dots. Each morning has been golden, a gentle autumn before the lashings of winter. I rise at 6:30 a.m., put on my jacket and my boots, and negotiate the creaky, narrow stairs. I've learned to duck my head after having cracked it several times on the low, whitewashed ceiling. Once outside, I take the path which leads from the pub down to the reservoir, over the bridge and loops back round. The way is easy, solitary. I have seen no one else at all on my walks. I concentrate on the sound of my shoes crunching on the gravel.
bird song occasionally. A robin, I suppose. Mallards flap and squawk when I come too close. And all the while, a few feet away, the lapping of the water of the reservoir. Its surface, gunmetal grey, unruffled. My legs ache. They are not used to walking. When I return to the pub, I have breakfast. 2 poached eggs on toast with a cafetiere of strong black coffee. They are young, the couple who own the pub, and they have a young son who toddles in after his mother as she pours my morning coffee. He looks at me through solemn blue eyes. I smile at him. He does not smile back. Until the wife says, "Come along, Taddy. Let's let Mr. Sinclair eat his breakfast in peace." Taddy? I wonder if it's short for Thaddeus, my father's name. I do not ask. Each evening, the husband, whose eyes are a deeper cornflower blue, places a glass of single malt on my table and says, "Had a good day, sir?" "Yes," I reply. "Very good. Thank you." I watch his broad back as he walks down the bar. I see the foam gather in the bottom of a glass as he pours a pint for 1 or 2 of the locals. From a village nearby, I suppose. The old man who spoke to me on my first evening has not returned. Or at least, I have not seen him. They nod and smile at me, and I nod and smile back, and then return my gaze to the crackling logs in the fireplace. It was yesterday, the 5th morning of my stay. A misty fog hung low and unmoving on the reservoir. It shrouded the path and covered me, muffling my footsteps in cotton wool. I could have been the only person alive. The silence was mystical. And then suddenly, there was a commotion in the branches above my head, and this black shape dropped to land right next to me as if it had been waiting for my approach. It reared up and stood in front of me, and just for a second, I thought it would speak. I heard a rasping intake of breath and a stench of stale breath in my nostrils. I reared back and lost my footing, and when I'd regained it, he was gone. A dark shape disappearing into the mist, wearing a long black cloak, its hem brushing backwards and forwards across the path. The blood pounded in my ears. His arrival had been strange, and his leaving odd. I was sure it was a he. I had an impression of silver stubble and piercing blue eyes. I went straight to my room on my return to the pub, too disturbed by what I'd seen for breakfast. Or had I imagined it? Doubts of my ability to be certain filled me with other doubts of duties and responsibilities that I'd abandoned with scarcely a second thought. In all of my calm quiet days at Laithwaite's Rest. Later, though, I found myself in the dining room, at my normal table with my book. I held the menu. It shook in my hand. I looked at it without taking any of it in. I was in two minds as to whether to tell the young couple about the old man this morning. They may say, "Oh, that's old Fred or old Tom, he's always wandering about." Or they may think I would imagined it. An old man, you say, dropping from a tree. They'd exchange glances at one another. Think me foolish, senile. Or they may become fearful, frightened that I'd lost my mind. For almost a week now, I had managed to put the whole horrible business to the back of my mind. And here I was again, on the edge of the abyss, about to be consumed by the blackness. Are you ready to order, sir? A serving girl had appeared next to me. Her dark hair was held back in a blue ribbon, and she wore a white blouse under a long brown pinafore. But what struck me most was the kindness in her face, the compassion in her eyes as she looked down at me. I became aware of a hubbub, the sound of cutlery on china and the clinking of glasses. And I looked around the room, and every table was full. The girl was speaking again. "My name is Martha," she said. "I'm here. I don't remember seeing her go. She just wasn't there." I sipped my wine. I would not tell the young couple about the old man this morning. To do so would be out of character. I had not invited small talk or conversation in all my time at Laithwaite's Rest. My spirits rose. At least I had made a decision. "Michael, my dear friend!" It was Hugh Bartholomew. His piggy eyes glittered, and the disgusting foam gathered in the corners of his mouth as he spoke. "Fiona spotted you. She's over there by the window." I looked across the room. Fiona, her shoulders bare and bony above a silver dress, raised a glass and smiled. But I was profoundly shocked by her appearance. Most of her teeth were missing, and her hair was just a few wisps of grey on a bald head. What was the matter with her? Was she ill? Hugh was speaking again. "Come and join us. Haven't seen you since, well, since the balloon went up. Anger shot through me like fire. He'd taken everything. He thought it was a joke. He'd taken my home, my career, my wife, my sanity. And he thought it was funny. I made myself stare at him. Dared myself to tell him that he was the guilty one, not me. But I couldn't hold his gaze. My eyes dropped to his disgusting belly, quivering, as if all his greed, his gluttony, his mendacity had gathered there in one solid lump of lard. I don't remember leaving the dining room, but I must have. Because this morning when I woke, I was back in my room. At least, I was sure it was my room, but it was changed. The curtains were of a long, dark green material, and there was a picture rail running round the walls, and from it hung 2 large Dales landscapes. There was a fireplace opposite my bed, which had not been there before. And on a wooden table under the window sat a ceramic, cream-coloured jug and bowl. It was different, and yet it felt right, how it should be. I dressed and negotiated the stairs, ducking my head instinctively. The wife was standing at the bottom, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a long black dress and held her little boy's hand. "Good morning, Mr. Sinclair," she said. "This way." I followed her down a long, dark passage until I reached a stone-flagged kitchen. There was a black-leaded range in the grate, and a dog panted near the door. In the doorway stood the husband. His boots were muddy. He pulled off his cap. "Good morning, Mr. Sinclair," he said. He held out his arm to his wife and child. They joined him in the doorway. And then they all turned back to look at me and smiled, as if posing for a photograph. Beyond them, through the door, 2 dark figures, indistinct in the early morning light. I said what I knew I would say. There was a girl, Martha, and the wife said what I knew she would say. "She's waiting for you on the bridge." They stand aside to let me pass. I step outside into a different world. It is the same world, but a different time. I know this. path is familiar to me now, comforting. The trees, the grasses, the birds, they're all still here. And the surface of the reservoir is one solid mass of gold. I approach the bridge, and there's Martha. A light breeze lifts her dark hair from her shoulders and lets it fall. The old man is here, behind me. I know he's there. I have no need to turn around. I can sense him. And I can hear the hem of his long black cloak sweeping backwards and forwards.